Thanks for. Okay, I think we're ready to go. Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is day 4 of the Social Justice Research Symposium, and today the theme is Structural and Institutional Impacts. The session's entitled Transition and Reentry, Life After the Institutions, and it's featuring individuals who have lived experience in transitioning back into society after military service or incarceration. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And I think we'll start off with our panelists. I will introduce myself first, I guess. My name is Dr. Gretchen Haas. I am an associate professor of psychiatry and psychology at the University of Pittsburgh. I'm also the associate director of the Vision for VA Veterans Affairs MIRECC, which is a center that's devoted to research, clinical care, and education for veterans in helping to enhance the quality of their lives and their outcomes from healthcare. So we're going to turn over to the panel, and I'm going to ask for each of our panel members to please introduce themselves. Dee, can we start with you?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Deidra Hubay. I go by Dee. I am a student at Duquesne University in the 4-1 Applied and Public Sociology program. I'm also a Marine Corps veteran. I'm really excited to be here today. I served in the Marine Corps. I went in 2015 and I exited service in June of 2018. And I was stationed on Camp Pendleton in California. I did not deploy during my time, but I really learned a lot while I was in the service. And now I enjoy being a student at Duquesne and seeing where my experiences in the Marine Corps will take me in my research.
You're muted. You're muted.
I'm going to stay. Dee, we talked about the fact that you went right into the Marines out of high school. I just wanted to add that.
Oh, yes. Thank you for adding that in. I didn't have a typical journey. I was 15 years old when I decided that I wanted to join the Marine Corps. I went home to my family and I was like, I want to do this. They kind of thought that I was going to outgrow that. And then the time came for me to be 17 and I entered the delayed entry program, which is you formally enlist, but then you have like your waiting period during your high school and you leave right after your graduation. So shortly after my graduation from high school, I was 18 at the time. Barely, is when I left for boot camp.
Thank you. Okay. Hassan, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name's Hassan Stevens. I was in the Air Force from 86 to 90. And then I was incarcerated from a period of 17 years, 98 to 2015. I've been home ever since. Currently, I'm employed in the Laborers Union in Pittsburgh, 1058 local, and I put the gas lines in the infrastructure out here in the city.
An important job for our city. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Callie.
Hello, everybody. My name is Tally Thompson. It's been over 19 years since I've been incarcerated. I originally caught a case at 19 years old in New Jersey, coming across the George Washington Bridge. Was on the run from the state of New Jersey for 3 years. It then spun 3 years in the penitentiary in the state of New Jersey. I'm currently director of Violence Prevention Initiative at Operation Better Block under leadership of Jerome Jackson in Homewood. Yeah, I think that's it on the intro.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you for joining us. It's great. And Jamar.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jamar Williams. I started off getting arrested at the age of 13, went in and out of incarceration all the way up until the age of 18. where I was out for a few years before going back in for a period of 5 years in the federal system. Some of that time I spent up in White Deer, which is up in the middle of Pennsylvania, but then also transitioning down to Ferreton, FCI down in New Jersey. Currently, I've been out for, I say about 17 years. Did some went to school for public accounting, but then turned around, went and started working in prison reentry. And currently, I help train people in restorative justice processes in the state of Maine.
So that's really interesting, Jamar. You've been to several different institutions, it sounds like. Kind of like 3 is at least, is that right?
More than 3. I've been to probably about 6 or 7 of them as a juvenile.
Oh, wow.
About 6 of them as a juvenile, but 2 of them as an adult.
Okay, so we'll keep that in mind, because that's seems like a pretty important aspect of what you've been through, moving from one place to another, perhaps. I don't know. It seemed like it might be. Before we start off with some more specific questions, I'd really appreciate each of you thinking for a minute about how you define reentry. What does reentry mean? What does it look like from your perspective? Anybody want to raise your hand and let us know? Go ahead.
I can. So to me, successful reentry is that when we give the person the ability to independently stand on their own, to have an identity that can provide for him, his family, and no longer need a system of reentry services. If we put people in positions that, I assist you with reentry, but I'll always kind of need you there for your services, then I think we've done that individual injustice. So to me, successful reentry becomes independence.
Thank you. Anybody else? Hassan or Jamar?
Yes, sure. I'll jump in there. I feel, that the successful reentry, it requires opportunity. A lot of times the people, when they reenter, they may have a mindset or a vision of exactly, what they want to do, and some don't. But, a lot of times it requires opportunity and for people to give you a chance. Some people, the system doesn't rehabilitate most of us. So the rehabilitation has to start within. And then once you feel like you're ready to leave your past life behind and begin with a new life, then you need opportunity. And I think, you need a network of people around you, like a support system, to kind of facilitate in that. And I was fortunate to have that reentering back into society. And I think for people to make a successful reentry, it requires that, especially if you've been away for a long period of time, because you have a lot of things to adjust to reentering back into society.
I imagine it's like all human beings. We all need some support, and yet you need maybe more in order to make that transition at that time. And you're saying that's really important, the human contact, the human support that you have. Jamar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just said exactly.
Great.
And to go along with both what Hassan and Talia had stated, those things are needed. And if I might add this, people being able to be on their own 2 feet and know who they are now, not who they were, but have an identity of knowing who they are right now. And so in this, where there's a transition where the paradigm kind of shifts, where they're no longer a threat. Not in survival mode, but now they're thriving. They're thriving human beings, people that are flourishing in life. I think that's what successful reentry looks like.
Thank you. These are wonderful in perspectives. I think they're complementary. Dee, what do you have to say about reentry?
Yeah, I definitely want to echo everything that they said, but I would just add that I think it goes beyond just the typical measures that we would think of, like, are we gainfully employed? Do we, or do we have those types of things? Are we going to school? What are we doing? And it also is, to build off what Hassan said, talking about our support systems and how connected we are to our community. And I'll let some of the previously incarcerated panelists see if this is the same for them. But at least for the Marine Corps, despite the amount of services that are nonprofit, public, that are available, a lot of veterans, even the ones who do report doing well economically or otherwise, have much difficulty feeling connected to their communities, and kind of like the experience that they had and the values and the identity, like Jamar said, the identity that they have isn't an identity that fits well within the bounds of their new, of the regular, so to speak, society's norms and values.
Well, thank you. You know, Dee, I have to call attention to the fact of something very important today that I didn't mention in the beginning that we talked about. And that is that today's a very special day for veterans and for all of our society. It's Veterans Day, and it's no surprise that we have veterans on our panel today. We want to pay tribute to the service that our veterans here have paid, to the service they've offered. But also to all veterans. And so I just want to, before going further, acknowledge that and thank you guys for your service and others in the audience as well. Having had a pause there, I wonder if all of you on the panel could sort of reflect on what you've talked about, what each of you have offered up. Do you have any reactions to hearing what other people have offered as their experiences of successful reentry, or the qualities of what makes for successful reentry? You started to talk a little bit among yourselves. Go ahead.
So to me, something that Dee said that was important when she says identities. I remember saying to myself, you know, I ended up doing 3 years in the penitentiary, right? And I remember saying to myself that the majority, if I looked at the body of work of my life, the majority of my life I had done really well. Like I never had a juvenile record. I was vice president of my school, president of student council. I received the Martin Luther King Achievement Award as a graduating senior from Perry High School, right? But even up until literally 2 years ago, I was still being hurt by my identity of a return of an ex-felon, like literally, like lack of security when it came to employment situations. Even folks discussing, you know, the fact that I've, you know, been a returning citizen or ex-felon when I haven't been arrested in over 20 years. And I say to myself, well, I've been good the majority of my life. Why does those 3 years continue to be this identity that tends to hurt me when it comes to, you know, successful, you know, being, let's say, the acceptance within society in a sense. And I never understood it, you know what I mean? But I start to understand it more and more that I go down these rabbit holes and understand these systems.
Hey, Tally, that's an interesting point. I want to ask you a question because in sociology and psychology, we talk about internalizing, taking in the stigma. The thing that you're talking about is the attitudes of people in society toward people who've been incarcerated. And that can stick. And sometimes people take that in and they start believing there's something wrong, or they continue to believe or lose faith in themselves. So I'm wondering, it sounded almost as if you were able to maintain an identity that was different and apart from what people were laying on you.
Well, I really used it as a chip on my shoulder, and I looked at it as I remember telling myself this as I was going through the academic institutions and getting my degrees, because I ended up getting 2 degrees, associate's degree as a paralegal and a bachelor's degree in legal studies. And I remember saying to myself, this makes me unique because I have this experience as a returning citizen and inside those institutions, and I have these degrees as well from these academic institutions, and therefore other people can't get those experiences that I got unless they want to commit crime and go to jail. But outside of that, it makes me extremely unique. And I used to just tell myself, you're extremely unique because of your experiences and you have these other academic achievements as well.
That's remarkable. And it's something to think about and hang on to. And it's something that I think it's probably of value for a lot of folks, maybe folks you're working with too. Hassan and Jamar, did you have any other reactions, or Dee?
I'd like to jump in. So when I was listening to Tylee talk, I was also thinking about whether or not, Tylee, like you, in a strange way, feel accepted, or maybe even more accepted in the community that you came out of in prison than you did at the society you were coming back to at first. So in my experience, when I was getting done with boot camp, and like when we go into the military, there's this, at least for the Marine Corps, and there's some different standards for entry per branch, but in the Marine Corps, we have 13 weeks, 3 months of all day complete training. Everything is planned out for us. We do have no individuality, no autonomy. We're sleeping in the same rooms as other people, using the bathroom with other people, no privacy, all of these individual factors are fundamentally removed from your experience. So much so that in Marine Corps boot camp, you don't even get to use the word I. You don't allowed to have a self-identity. So you have to say things like this recruit or that recruit. And so that goes on through boot camp. And in the first phase, it's 30 days. Uncoincidentally, that's how long research says it takes to break a habit. So they're breaking us down during that time. And then in the second phase, they're reinstilling the new norms and values that they want us to adopt and mirror in order to succeed for our life inside the military. And then in our last phase of boot camp, it's the shortest time after we complete our crucible. That's what is like our final test. We'll then get to reinstate the use of I as a Marine for the first time, but it's very hard to make that transition. All of a sudden, I have been programmed to say this recruit, and I would say like this recruit would like to use the restroom. Like I couldn't even make those kind of decisions on my own. And so now we all say while we're there, boot camp is terrible, this is horrible, I can't wait until I go home, I can't wait to see my family, because at the end of our 10-day, at the end of boot camp, we get what's called a 10-day leave, where we do get to see our families before we go to Marine combat training and then our job school. And so I was so excited, so looking forward to this. And then like a day or two after I get home, I was like, man, like things are different here. I don't really feel like I fit in anymore. And people are like out of step. People aren't walking tall enough, or whatever this like elitist idea was that I had in my head. And I suddenly wanted to go back to all of the people that I was with in the military. I couldn't wait to get back to the job school and to go to MCT, which was going to subject me to more of the experiences that I thought were so bad when I was going through them. And I was longing to be back to them. And I talked to some other veterans about that, and they had felt similarly. So we have this like erasure of our identity, I guess, going in, and these like theatrical experiences. And I guess for incarceration, you go to trial and you do all these things, but when you get out, you're just kind of shoved out a back door. Here's your belongings, figure it out. And then we're like, okay, how?
I wonder if there are other folks who've had that experience, even in, in prison. Have you had that experience?
Can I jump in?
Yeah, please, go right ahead.
I would say that it's very similar somewhat to what she described, because in going into prison, you kind of lose your identity because you're grouped into a geographical thing. Some people maybe even a gang component, but you do lose the identity because you become more of like a number to the staff. You know what I mean? And then as you re-enter back into society, a lot of people they maintain that because for a period of time, maybe they developed a routine in prison, or they become institutionalized somewhat. So when you come out now, you realize that the rules that applied in prison don't necessarily apply out here in reentry. You know, it takes people maybe a long time to adjust, because maybe you're not used to having people bump into you, or people not say excuse me, or certain things that go a long way in prison. Out here, necessarily in society, people are just going about their days, and they're just in their own microcosm, and they're not necessarily wondering whether or not you're adjusting or what have you. They don't know that experience that you may have. But
are you saying you get more respect in prison in some ways?
Well, it goes a long way in prison. So somebody who's been incarcerated for a long time, normally they're gonna adjust and have respect and space and different things, privacy, you know, for people, because maybe like she was saying, you don't have much privacy in prison as far as the staff or whatever. They can just walk right in, they can just go through your belongings and everything. But as you come out, you realize that, you know, things out here are much different, and you have to adjust to the life out here. And even though you may retain some of that from inside, but out here it doesn't necessarily apply. Those prison rules or prison standards, you know, but out here it's just different. You know, people, they just go about their lives and they don't worry about things like, you know, am I too close to this guy, or walking over you or bumping into you? And a lot of times in prison, those things don't happen because it could, you know, spark violence or whatever. You know, respect is a big thing in a prison life, whereas out here, you know, you have to earn respect, or you have to have a certain status in life for people to respect you.
That's really interesting. So inside the institution, there's certain rules and regulations that sort of provide a framework for respecting or boundaries between people for safety, for other things like that. Yeah.
Definitely.
But when you get out, some of those boundaries, a lot of they're not there any longer, and you have to earn individual respect from people and deal with people who aren't treating you with the respect that you expect, the way you would get possibly in the institution of prison in that case. Jamar, what's your reaction to some of this? Do you have any thoughts about it?
Yeah, definitely. Going in, you lose all your identity. You have this street identity, what you once had, whether in what status you were stepping inside, you have a certain status. But once you're starting to go inside, what happens is you take away your clothes. And so now you don't have your clothes or no jewelry. So now you just become a regular person, and everybody has the same uniform. Somebody might be a little bit more crispier than others, newer than others, but it's still the same. Then again, the second thing that's taken away is your name. Your name is taken away, and you're provided with a number. Now you're a number, and usually your last name, if that's the case. So now you have your name, a renaming of you. But then also the one of the other things is dignity. Dignity is taken away when your processing in is being stripped in front of other guys, other males, or if it was a woman, other women. And so now you're being stripped and provided these new clothing, and it really robs you of your dignity, and not just in just coming inside, but even when you're going up for visits. If you're coming for a visit, before you get to the visiting room, you have to strip down, bend down, cough, naked before you could go out there to see your loved ones. And then the same thing takes place when you're on your way back out of this visit. That still goes on as well. So now you have this, your dignity is being robbed. And to go along with that, yes, you don't have that sense of space. And even for myself, I had a bad experience, I would say. I happened to be, my cell happened to be underneath the TV. And so in going to the bathroom one evening, we usually, or your cellie would know if you're going to the bathroom, because you put something over the window, to where's the correctional officer opened up the door, regardless of me having something up to let him know I was going to the bathroom, and said he needed to check the room, and left the door wide open while I'm going to the bathroom, sitting down. And I asked him if he could come back, and he says, no, it's not about coming back, I'm coming in, and just left the door open. And so having experiences like that, I mean, you're really stripped from most everything. And then coming back out into the world, and I would say it's like this. There's two totally different worlds. In that world, there's like three different sets of rules. You have the rules of the institution, which are in black and white. You have the rules that are there for every time a new set of staff come on, they institute their own rules on how they're going to have these things work out. And then you have the rules that are between those that are inside of there. And this is where you have the gangs, you may have the cliques, you may have where you're from. There's these other set of rules that go along with that as well. And so that's that world. And this is where that respect comes in. But when you're stepping out here, now you're literally stepping into a new world. And none of those identities that you had, it's a new world. So trying to identify where do I fit in out here, especially when you're trying to do something new and different. And I know for myself, I know that I had everyone that I knew was still doing wrong. So in order to do something differently, I had to ask myself, how do I live? How do I even put clothes on? What kind of clothes do I wear? In trying to get work. And so it was just a whole new world. And seeing as though I began at like 13, and so all I knew up until almost 30 was just streets, not knowing how to really have a job or anything. And so trying to identify and develop an identity in that space is very it's difficult. It's a difficult transition.
Yeah.
And that's why the work that some of us do is so important to help others.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Dee. You had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Shamar. I think what he's saying too, for me, it just gets at the bigger question of like, who am I, right? Like we just spent all of this time becoming someone, perfecting ourselves and changing ourselves to mirror the way that we were supposed to act, the way that we thought we were supposed to act, the one right way there is to be. And Jamar's absolutely right. In the Marine Corps or in the military, there's also 3 sets of rules. We have the institutional rules, maybe the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and that's in black and white. You can't break it. Those are the laws of the military. Then every time we get a change of command, we get a new officer, those rules start to change and those norms that we were used to change a little bit. But because of that respect and that hierarchy that Hassan was talking about before, there isn't too much of a disruption during those changes of command. It's noticeable. You might hear some grumbles amongst the people that have been there for a while that are going through those changes, but ultimately that hierarchy is going to make sure that people don't step too far out of line. And then we come back and we're just like, who are we now, and how do we, not only we are grappling with these like tangible parts of transitioning and reentry, like again, gainful employment, or I was 18, I've never filled out an application for an apartment before, and some of my friends are getting out with their bachelor's degrees from school, and I haven't done the basic things that people my age are supposed to be doing because I had, my housing was paid for, we had meals provided to us. And so we're trying to deal with these tangible things. Yeah, how do I actually live and exist? But then how do I find out who I am, and how do I determine what my morals are and what the morals of the institution were, and how do I discern those in myself? So there's really 2 layers of reentry. There's your physical and external parts of your reentry, and then there's your internal ones, which are a lot more complex.
I'm wondering if those of you who are working with other people reentering, what you think is needed to help with that process. I don't know, Tally, do you have anything you want to add to that?
So let me tell the quick story that I think will give a great perspective about reentry as a whole. A few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was reading a book, and the book was given the actual account of slaves when they were on a plantation, and the day that they actually heard when they were freed, where they heard the reading of I believe the reading of the Emancipation Proclamation, and they were speaking about the joy that they felt as they were reading, as the master was reading this, and it was like, yo, we're actually free, and there was so much joy. And then they said when they went back into the slave quarters, they realized, where are we going to go, right? And they said anxiety set in, like, we're free, but we're free in this country. Now, where are we going to go? And they tell the story of different people kind of sneaking off, going back to the plantation, making an agreement with the slave owner to stay on the plantation some type of way. And when I read that, it gave me the exact feeling when they let me out of jail in New Jersey. Literally, they took me to a homeless shelter, and they said, you got to line up over there for a bed at the homeless shelter, because for whatever reason, they restricted me from coming back to Pittsburgh. So after 3 years, they tell me you can't go back to Pittsburgh. Your neighborhood's not good enough for you to go back to the neighborhood you grew up in, which is the Mexican War Street right now. But at that time, it was considered, a lot worse. So they said that they said I was restricted from going back home to the Mexican War Street. So therefore, they felt it was best for them to release me at a homeless shelter in Paterson, New Jersey. And I remember standing in line in the end. So I went from joy, like the joy on when I was riding on the train and on my way to meet the place where the guy would take me to the homeless shelter, because you're free. It had to be the closest thing to being able to feel what birth felt like, because I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm free. I was so happy. And then anxiety set in as I'm standing in line with a group of homeless men to get a bed. And then if you don't get in at a certain time and get a bed, then you're delegated to a blanket on the floor. And then before all of that happens, you all have to go in the basement and shower together. So folks got to shower, and then they get a bed, then you get a blanket. And then what people don't know is that at 6 a.m., you got to be off of the premises. So you can't just hang around at the homeless shelter. You got to be off of the premises. So here it was. I went from a joy of being released, anxiety of staying at a homeless shelter, and then the anxiety where I'm free in Paterson, New Jersey, just walking around, like literally just walking around. Like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I don't know what's going on. And I remember going to the probation, to the parole officer at the time, and there was this list of things that the state institution said that they would provide me with. So I said, here's the paper. I need this, that. And he said, well, that fund doesn't have any money in it. Here's $24. And at that point, I started, in a sense, it reminded me when the slaves negotiated with the master to stay on the plantation. I said, okay, I can't live like this. I got to negotiate this. And I told somebody to send me a ticket from Pittsburgh. And at that point, the minute I get on a bus and leave, I violated my probation. So I literally, within 3 days of being out, I violated and headed back to Pittsburgh. But that was the negotiation. Other than my other alternative was to walk around in Paterson, New Jersey as a so-called free man, and not knowing what that would entail. So I remember like saying, this is all, it's like really at that point when I read that book, I said, this is all about slavery. And we can't forget that. We can't forget that the 13th Amendment doesn't free you as a slave. It says, unless they're being punished of a crime, then you're legally allowed to say you have slaves. So in this state, in this country, anybody that has committed a crime under the 13th Amendment, you're allowed to call them slaves and say you have slaves, because they are being punished for committing a crime. And it dawned on me at that moment, like, okay, this system is designed to make sure that I have a high possibility of returning back inside those institutions. Because even in the state of Pennsylvania, parole and probation is funded off of the fines and court costs that we have to pay once we're released. It's not funded from state dollars. It's funded from the backs of the people that are incarcerated. So therefore, that system must exist, or this financial economic system won't exist. So it made all this sense in the world that it was slavery.
So that's a really good illustration. Was that from the book Juneteenth?
Yes,
Chance?
yes,
Okay.
yes, it
Just
was.
in case
Yes, it
people
was.
want to read it, I just wanted to mention that.
Yes, it was.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a very a remarkable example of the kind of situation and your feelings. You're remarkably the challenges you were facing. I had a question though. You negotiated, you said, to get that ticket back to Pittsburgh. Did you have any repercussions after that you had to deal with?
So if I hadn't maxed out, because they had me on administrative hold because they didn't let me back. So 3 weeks later, what I did was I would come back to see my PO every Friday, right? And he would make hints, don't leave the state or you'll violate. And then on my last time coming back for the third week, he said, oh, you've maxed out. So therefore now you're released. But he knew if he wanted to, literally I had a ticket in my pocket that had me returning back to Pittsburgh after I had came to visit him on Friday. So therefore, I have violated, he could have violated me, and I could have been back inside the institution for violating my parole. So that's when I say you get to the point that you negotiate and say, I can't live under these conditions, therefore I'll negotiate, you know, a situation that may not be in the best interest, you know, of my freedom. But like the slaves, they negotiated. Why would you want to stay on a plantation where you just got finished working for free? But therefore your conditions are like, well, what else do I just walk free on this land, or I negotiate to stay under, you know, under a master that I've been serving for the last 10 years for free?
Got it. Thank you for clarifying that. It sounds like you're also talking about a question that I think we'd like to hear more about, and that is what could be done, what should be done, or what is being done to help people with that kind of a transition. Are there resources out there? And if they are, how obviously available are they to people? Is it hard to find the resources?
Everything is as incentivized. When you have a group of people that are supervising a group of people and their existence is on them people to continue to be a part of this cycle, then there's no incentive for them to reduce that population. I was just in a conversation with a probation officer that said they were told that if they didn't collect certain fines from the people they were supervising, then they would be getting laid off because their funding came directly from the court cost and fine from the people they're responsible for supervising. You can't have a system that incentivizes people to maintain, to be a part of the system, because if we reduce the system, then you reduce an economy. That doesn't make sense at all. And I don't see how we keep trying to act like there's all these other complicated matters around slavery.
So ironically, that's working against whatever many of you are doing to help people with reentry from prison and coming back to the community. It's a setup to make for failure almost there in some ways. I mean, and you're also saying that there's structural aspects of our society that work against people re-entering successfully. And I'm sure there are others as well. Yeah. Hassan, Jamar, Dee, anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, I'd like to jump in. I think when I got to the Veterans Court, when I did the Veterans Court in Pittsburgh, it provided a certain set of resources and people around you as support that, you know, would facilitate, like say you needed a certain skill set or you wanted to obtain some training or anything like that. I think the same, how should I say it? That same system should be designed for everybody re-entering if they're interested in, you know, changing their life, want to provide for themselves or their family. You know, it would remove some of the fear and the question marks in your head of like, okay, what am I going to do now? You know, if you have someone to sit there and talk to about it, okay, well, what would you like to do? What type of training do you need? How can I facilitate, you know, to have you access a certain amount of resources, maybe to get your CDL, say per se, or if you want to learn a certain skill set to become a welder or whatever you're trying to do. I feel that would be very helpful in, you know, minimizing the people that probably return back to prison, because it's always easier to go back to what you know to take care of yourself, you know, or to provide for your family or what have you. You know, it's very easy to fall back into what you have done, you know, for the most part of your life, as opposed to something new, you know, something uncomfortable.
So you're saying
for a lot of guys that are re-entering.
So the Veterans Court, just briefly, it provides the kind of structural supports that can be helpful, both psychologically and having a sense of faith that somebody's in trust and somebody caring about you and wanting to help you, and also resources that the VA is an institution that is obligated to provide resources to veterans, whether you've been imprisoned or not. These days, we're finally recognizing the need to provide for people, regardless of your situation, where you've been, and if you've been in prison. And we know, I think in the VA, many professionals, many people in the institution recognize that this is critical for success. So I'm personally glad to hear you've had some positive experiences with that. And I also hear you saying that it would be great if other institutions, if communities could learn from that model and do it more
Right.
broadly. Yeah.
Exactly.
You know what's amazing to me is that similar to the military, prisons, everything's ran by the individuals. Like, so in military, all the jobs are folks that are part of the military. Inside the prisons, everything's ran by the inmates. So what is amazing to me is that when they're released, why do people say, well, what can they do? They just ran a whole institution. Like when something happens inside those institutions, they don't call outside individuals. They go to someone's cell who's been working on.
Yep, she froze. He'll come back, I'm sure. Pause for a minute here. So what he's beginning to say, I think, is that the people within the institution are very capable, and they have a way of solving problems. And then in contrast, coming out, we don't, as a community, turn to those folks and look at them as having had skills and value or experience that really can help them lead. While we're waiting for Tally D, you had your hand up, and I know you've talked a little bit about some of this before. Can you?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. So yes, there are like.
Can I ask if Sydney can communicate with Tally and see if we can get him back online? Okay, help him out. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, at least for veterans, there's a lot of resources and services that are available, but that they're still not meeting the needs. And a lot of these groups that do exist are not meeting like their target goals and the way that they want to be helping veterans. And so I think that a lot of that has to do with where the solution lies and what's being missed by these. I don't think these programs are working. So like, as we've been hearing, a lot of our experiences are very similar. While we have like maybe unique or specialized specific needs, a lot of the experiences are coming back, at least to me, seem like they're really outlining it. And so when Tylee said that it was expensive to do those things and then there was no benefit, that really resonated for me, because I don't have the information in front of me, but I would guess that it's somewhere around at least $50,000 per Marine every time you train them, like to send them to boot camp, to pay them, to give them MCT training, and then to give them their job training for all the skills that they're going to be carrying on. And so if you're going to be investing that kind of money in them, that's because they know that they have a contract or a time that they have to serve in prison for X amount of time coming forward. They know that they're going to be getting that money back. And so where I think the answer to a lot of this lies is when we're trying to transition back. I mentioned earlier, we go through this 3-month thing, but then when we're getting out, we have a 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., 5 days a week experience called Transition Readiness Seminar. And the Department of Labor comes and shows us a slideshow, and the VA comes and shows us a slideshow. And so like, we don't really gain anything from that, but why would the military in the system that we exist in want to spend the amount of money that they spent training people to adhere to this new lifestyle when they're going to be leaving the lifestyle after that and no longer be of benefit or of service to the institution? So that's why they're just the institution is not at all invested in the reentry, but the institution is what helped get us into those positions in the first place. So they have to be taking more responsibility on that end. And the institution might not see it as a benefit, but who's going to be benefiting is our communities. If we're coming back, and for incarcerated people, recidivism rates are super high for a lot of systemic and structural factors that we've sort of touched on throughout this. But for veterans, like suicide rates, incarceration, homelessness, substance abuse, those things are through the roof. So if these programs were working, then that wouldn't be happening. And our communities we're failing our communities by not helping these people come back in feel welcomed and feel accepted. And when you don't feel that way, there's not a lot of community cohesion and our communities suffer.
So the two stakeholders that you guys have pointed out, the institution, whether it's the VA, the prison system, the probation part of the justice system, versus the communities. It sounds as if what we're pointing out is the ways in which the community and these institutions are not working together. The community needs to be informed more about some of the things you guys are pointing out today, that we in community are not really compelled to think about, look at, consider the way I think we're talking about today. I wondered if Jamar, if you have any. Thanks for rejoining us, Charlie. It's glad you made it.
Somebody, I didn't get the message, but we had an IT guy and the internet went out for a hot second.
Bummer.
And
Well,
it happened and I'm back now. So.
You're back and we can even see more of you now. It's good, good visuals. Jamar, I wondered if you wanted to add anything. We'll catch you up, Tally. We're talking right now about the lack of connectedness between, I put it as two stakeholder groups: the institution of the justice system, the prison, and the probation officers have their needs and their values, and the community has needs. Dee was just saying that the community would benefit more if they provided the resources, and that the military does a lot of investment in people coming in, but not investment coming out. And that need for help in emerging, in making the transition back to the community is something that the military is not going to do. The justice system does a lousy job, as you were pointing out, in many cases. I think the Veterans Court is an example of a model that might work. And also communities don't know enough about what you are sharing with us today. We have a lot to learn. I think, Jamar, do you have anything you want to add to this?
Yes, what I would add to this is that I think in both aspects, both prison and in military, if more was placed on, emphasis was placed on helping people to return back to society. This is the critical piece, because it's like this. When someone is coming back, or when someone is going through school, before they get into the profession, they do an intern. They do an internship so they could get hands-on experience and figure out if this theory, how does this really play out in real time? Before they could sometimes get paid, they're sitting there and they're developing this experience of what this really looks like in real time. And in the same sense, if that was an opportunity for, if it's like that with school, imagine how much more it should be in a prison setting, to where you're learning how to operate in these skills. And it's not just a book or a little class for 2 hours or something like that, but you're really given the opportunity to have hands-on training in real life stuff, such as Dee was mentioning, bank accounts, and leases, the whole nine, living on your own and operating as such, because you've been programmed throughout this whole time that you're away to not be able to make any decisions. The decisions are out of your hands. And so now to empower you to start walking into this space, so that when you do transition back out to society, you're able to do so more effectively, and to have the community be able to embrace you as such, where there may be more education that's needed in that area, and breaking down the barriers and the stigmas that are attached there. Because in reality, we're all losing when we don't open up these doors of opportunity. Because here we have it, people are wanting people to come in for jobs and careers, but until they start realizing that we have these assets sitting on standby, there's this big disconnect, and now the country as a whole is going through issues. But if
that relates, go ahead, please finish your.
If we took one step back and tying this into what Tali was saying, we have the necessary skills. For instance, I ran a whole warehouse for three prisons, ordering, packing up the trucks and getting us sent out to the designated places for I say 5,000 to 6,000 people that have 3 meals a day. And so thinking about that, these are real skills. And I'll let Tali continue to pick up where he left off at before he was at T.
Yeah.
No, I don't. I mean, that point you just made, Jamar, is it that's it in a nutshell. Is that the skill set is there, but the thing is that at the same time, let's be honest, let's be real transparent with this conversation. And if you ever go into the courthouse, down the city county, down to the courthouse, the Pittsburgh, county courthouse, when you walk inside there, you know who's there for profit, and you know who's there for so-called punishment, in a sense. Like, there's a large majority of minorities that are there to be punished and to be a part of this system. One thing that one of the agencies that I was talking to in this last focus group that I was a part of, he said that the Allegheny is obligated to have a court, but it's not in the budget to provide for that court. So therefore, the courts has to be, the operation and the cost has to come off the backs of the people that are a part of that system. And you're either on one side of that system where the possession of your body creates the revenue to operate this system, or you're a part of the system that's profiting off of the services that are being provided for this court system. And it's really that simple. So if we were to create a system, and this is when I knew when I came out of jail that it wasn't about rehabilitation, because I said to myself, during this time that they had me for 3 years, they could have been preparing me to come right out to a quality job. Like, if you go back to the history of incarceration, and it was convict leasing. The states were doing convict leasing. They knew like, yo, this is good labor you can get, it's free. But all of a sudden, when there's no convict leasing, where the pay isn't free, now all of a sudden it's like, well, what do we do with these guys when they come out? No, we make sure that they maintain a part of that system, and every different part that's profiting from that will be okay, because this is a system that's producing 84% recidivism rate. There's no way any other system. So, and I'm rattling when I say that Professor McCone said every system is designed to get the results that it's getting. So these systems are designed to get the results that they're getting. It's not by chance, it's not by coincidence, it's not by chance that 60% of the state penitentiaries have Black and brown individuals. This is by design. So, I digress, and I don't want to be on a rant, but I get really passionate about an issue that people feel like is really complex, and it's not complex. It's an extension of slavery, because slavery was about profit, and incarceration is about profit. Prison is about profit. And even to the point now, reentry becomes a new form of profit, that if you're able to show you have the possession of these bodies outside of the system, then that's great. But if I have to exist in my state for you to continue to exist, then that becomes a conflict of interest. So if everyone you help no longer needs your help, then your population starts to dwindle, and then now we won't need you anymore. But
but let me interrupt you with that,
yes,
because there are people coming in, there are people coming out all the time. It's like a river going. It's not that, if you were successful, I was going to ask folks, how can you shake this up? Because I don't think it's a finite quantity of people. I'm not going to argue with you. I think I agree with so much of what you're saying, but that last point, I wanted to challenge you on that. If we're successful in moving people into the community, I don't know who the we is, but if we're taking advantage of the skills that people have, the knowledge that they have, if we treat them with more respect,
then you'll be taken away from a system that's profiting pretty good right now. So,
but there are other people coming into that system that are going to be there after you leave. Joe Blow is coming in behind you.
But the rate creates that I'll be back. So there's a 3-year and a 5-year window that says I will. So there was a study where they had studied 400,000 individuals from 30 different states, and 5 out of 6 reoffended within I think a 2-year window. And the 2-year window, it resulted in 2 million arrests. So therefore, the number says that the way you send me out within 3 years and 5 years, I will be back.
So you're talking about the economics of the system, and I think it's a really important point that you're making. And it's probably worth writing something about this, a group of people who are, at Duquesne and working with people at Duquesne to expand on that. It's a really good point. what I'd like to do is put that aside in the parking lot just for a moment and go back to asking the question, is there any hope for us as a society? Are there any resources out there that might be working? Can you imagine if it was in your hands, or if you could work with people in our community in Pittsburgh, what would you recommend?
So I was at a think tank meeting, a think tank, Elsinore-Bennu think tank for restorative justice meeting a few weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago now. And we had this woman come and talk about her organization called Damascus. And this is for reentry, but this is the first time I'd heard of the organization. And so I only know as much as her presentation gave me. But she said that she started working with people 6 months before they were supposed to be released from prison. And she would be, her or somebody in the organization would be going into the prison ahead of time, working with that person, maybe helping them with a resume, starting to find out what types of things or needs that they are going to need upon their exit. Because once you get out, that's the day you become homeless, or that's the day, you don't have access to the things you had anymore. So the planning can't start then. And if you don't have the access to the tools and resources to begin the planning ahead of time, there's always going to be that delay when you get out. And then what happens in that delay when you don't have the support that you need? But anyway, so they come in, then they help. And then she has employers who she works with to help people get jobs right after. And again, that's not the only measurement. We talked about there being like a lot of different layers to reentry, both internal and external. But I think that if there was some kind of program, and maybe Tylee or Jamal or Hassan can talk about if something like that would be useful from the incarcerated perspective. But in the military, I think that is something that would make a lot of impact. There are like a few programs that are available, like Boots to Business, for example, or Microsoft does a thing where certain veterans can get in there. But you have to go through like a process through your chain of command, and you have to get approval in order to use those resources. This isn't mandatory, and nobody has to give you the permission to use that. So it doesn't really matter how good or bad of a person you are, you just might not be able to use that. And in a lot of ways, when you're going to get out of the military, the people who are in charge think of those types of people less favorably. It's called dropping your pack. And we would say those people don't really matter anymore. They're not going to be here. And so there's no emphasis on helping them. And so your chances, I think, of getting some of those programs, the ones that are available, are pretty narrow. So if there was maybe like some kind of requirement, even if the military didn't want to take responsibility, some kind of externalized institution or program or something, and it could maybe even involve reentry from all kinds of institutions, whether that be prison or the military.
So I want to ask a question of everybody. Go ahead, please.
Can I say something really quick? And I just want to make this one point to what you said.
Yeah,
so to me, the hope is that any reentry program throughout the country, the top 3 administrators should all be successful returning citizens. Like when you are a successful returning citizen, that means you made it past the 3-year mark, you made it past the 5-year mark, which means you're a specialist. In the report that Professor Rick always refers to, it's 5 out of 6. So it's taking that 6 individual. So because all the millions of dollars that go to reentry, the top 3 administrative positions should be successful reentry. It would be as if when it comes to doing some electrical work that we don't go to the master electricians and ask them for their advice or their oversee of a particular job. It's like we're just going to anybody that knows electrical work and saying we're putting them in charge of a position. Any institution or organization that receives reentry dollars, the top 3 positions should be successful returning citizens.
Good point. I was wondering, as you were talking, Tally, and Dee as well, about why it is that the VA has invested so much in, let's say, the Veterans Court, and what is it that's not happening in our communities that might happen in terms of investment in people who have skills to offer, who aren't being recognized for those skills. That's a community leadership question. Maybe it's not where, I don't know, anybody have any thoughts about that? We have a new mayor coming in to Pittsburgh, for example. if there was to be an opportunity for a group of people to speak with the mayor's office about this, would that be a leverage point? Do you think, let's assume that you have the door open for that for a moment.
That might be a good opportunity. However, even bigger than that, you have plenty of organizations and businesses right now that are suffering after the pandemic, as far as employment. Even if somebody was able to reach out to them for how we have these supply lines are down and all these different things where you do actually have guys probably coming home, from prison or from the military, what have you, they could fill some of these positions, because a lot of these businesses are in the position where they're willing to train right now, whereas maybe prior to that, they would restrict you because you didn't have experience or maybe you had a record. But right now they found that, that a lot of the skilled people, for whatever reasons, aren't returning back to the workforce. And you have individuals that possibly would like to fill those positions. So maybe somebody could fill in that gap and say, hey, we have this whole, force of labor or whatever that could help stem some of those, those supply line issues that they're having right now, with this pandemic, or just recovering from this pandemic. Maybe that would be also another opportunity.
Yeah, that's creative thinking. That's good. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll jump in again. I study sociology, so I really look at things from like a systemic or structural point of view. A lot of the times there's definitely individual resources and ways that individuals can get help if they need it. And I have a lot of connections though. So if anyone's listening to this today and needs some, just let me know. But what I was going to say, and I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news on this, but I think that at a minimum, there's going to be this requirement for the institutions to at least have a willingness to communicate with the other, like with the people who are helping to do the resources after. Because if the people who are coming out have to go and seek the services and resources themselves, some will, but a lot of them will not, and in ways that puts an undue burden. Like when people are getting out, especially if they're socioeconomically challenged, or they don't have a home to go home to, or they don't have any plans, going and thinking about, oh, how am I going to get internet, or how am I going to go surf the world to figure out what resources are available to me, creates a barrier that people might not even it will just stop people from going to access those resources that are available. So if the institution could just communicate and be like, oh, these people are getting out and they're returning, because they do these things, at least for us, we have to fill out a packet, like where are we going to return home to? So they know, they have all this stuff on record, but they don't communicate that information with anybody else. So there's no handoff, and you're just kind of out on your own. And when we know that 0 to 3 year mark, Tylee highlighted it too, is the most vulnerable time for people when they're transitioning back. For veterans, that's the greatest risk of suicide. And deployed veterans are 41% more likely to commit suicide than the general public during those first 3 years. And non-deployed veterans, surprisingly to a lot of people, are 61%, 20% more likely even than deployed veterans to commit suicide than the general population during those first 3 years. So if we're asking this population of people who is clearly going through a lot of trauma to have to do a lot of that legwork on their own, and I'm not saying that they don't need to have personal responsibility, I'm just saying that it's just kind of the way things are. And we have to understand that not everybody who needs the help are going to be the ones who are avidly seeking it out.
I was thinking about organizations in our city. I just want to throw this out for consideration, not necessarily in our discussion today, but for the future, of people who have good ideas, like you folks on the panel. The Urban League, there's a Pittsburgh Initiatives program, mayor's office. And I think right now, frankly, with the new mayor coming in, it would seem to me it might be a time to really hit them up with some of these ideas. And I think that well, I shouldn't say Duquesne has leverage, but those of you who are here on this panel who care about these issues, I hope there's some discussion after today about how you can make a difference in getting people together. And I think what Tali and all of us are saying is that there's not enough collaboration, cooperation, and the structure is not in place to make these transitions, to get people before they leave prison 6 months in advance, to help them afterwards and knowing who to go to and what to do. It's obvious what contributes to the vulnerability. Yes, the depression, the risk for suicide, the risk for homelessness and substance abuse. It's so acute these days in particular. So are any of you working collaboratively with any other organizations? I know some of you are spending time. Tali, how about you?
Yes, I mean, here at Operation Better Block, we focus on reentry services. We have collaborations with individuals at Duquesne, with the EBTT think tank. We're also working, I'm a member of the House of Life, which is a majority group of returning citizens that are focusing on reentry, that'll have apartments and also have employment attached to it as well. And the majority of the 10 members on the board, 6 of them are returning citizen, the president returning citizen, and then the rest are professors, actually from Duquesne University. So, and then also I do have a good relationship with I had a great relationship with the current mayor and the new mayor as well. And to me, I'm going to make suggestions that there should be a office of reentry for returning citizens and veterans, and but they should focus on reentry services that are creating the ability for people to fish on their own, like to really be able to, like because if you look at the collective number of resources you may spend on an individual, if you were able to focus that collective amount and put that person in the position that he would no longer need you after 3 years, then to me that's getting the best bang for our buck. To me, Richard Garland was the one that gave me opportunities years ago. When I was transitioning, and Richard took me for filled out a tax return I became a taxpaying citizen, a homeowner, several degrees, and which meant I had student loans now. So he actually put more money on the books for society by the work that he done with me when you end up having me paying taxes, homeowner, and student loans, compared to who I was when he came across me when I was on a corner committing crimes.
So one of the things you're talking about are these kinds of the impact these helps have had on you personally, and then also going back to the mayor's office and any community. Communities are judged and evaluated on certain dimensions, and getting at leadership to point out that measurement of successful transitions and measurement of successful re-entry into jobs, reduction of recidivism, reduction of homelessness. That a lot of this and success and tracking all of this is, first of all, very important. It's very important to a city. It's important to selling this city to other people, what's good about Pittsburgh. So one of the tools that can be considered, I think, is measurement and if you're talking with a mayor's office, pointing this out. I'm sure they recognize it, but if you guys came in and pointed out that it's important that the citizenry needs to be able to track these things, you'd get their attention.
Go ahead, D. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Go right ahead, please. Hassan, are you saying something? Please.
No, I wasn't. Not that. That wasn't me.
Oh,
I think that's D.
D. Sorry.
I'll jump in. Yeah. Okay. So On a happier note, I think that this panel is like a really great place to start. We're bringing our experiences together. Veterans only make up like 8 to 11% of the population in general. So we're really small, and making change by ourselves is going to be fairly hard, I think. But then when we think about your guys' experience as reentrants too, we know like the United States has kind of a mass incarceration problem where we have 5% of the population, but 25% of the world's prisoners. So I think that if we combine like the kind of bipartisanship on the issue that veterans have and the numbers that are behind reentrants, that we could find like some common ground in a policy solution. And that's kind of where I would see a way forward. And I think that if I was to talk to the mayor, and to your point about measurement, Dr. Haas, I think something that I've wanted to do in one of my classes, and what I think would be helpful, is to have, and Tylee has said this many times, the people who have had these experiences be the ones to make the recommendations, and not have somebody who has studied us tell us what they think that we need. So I think that a way that the mayor could help at first, because I don't have all the answers. I want to, but I don't have them all now. So if the mayor would, you know, like make a grant or put some funding together to create a research team that includes reentrants and veterans on the team as researchers, as people who can give good feedback, then we can work together to find the solutions and create and inform the best potential policy answers there might be.
Mhm.
Good point.
And you
Yeah.
know, that coincides with it's important when someone when they start putting money towards something.
Mhm.
Like Washington, D.C., they have an Office of Reentry. And those people that have been inside of incarceration are the ones that kind of run that. And so if that was to take place, what Dee was saying, what we have is we'll understand the importance of the office of the mayor of Pittsburgh if we were to have something. And I'm not trying to put nothing else on his plate or anything else. I'm just saying that usually when monies are invested, you got some skin in the game, which means
Yeah.
that this is an important topic. And just like Talia has stated, instead of being the people returning could be more assets than liabilities to communities, to families, and to the system as a whole. And I don't even say the word system. The system is just redoing it. But they become more assets. And what happens is this breaks that systemic space where people are continuously going inside of prison, because if a mother or a father is there, what happens is they're able to be a parent. And if they're able to be a parent, it breaks that cycle of that child or those children stepping into those places. But then also empowering people with this, and not just asking for jobs, but realizing that they could be businesses themselves. And if the city was to actually start developing pipelines or initiatives for people to have businesses that would be able to connect with the city. These are just some just thoughts off the top of my mind in regards to empowerment of people and going about things in a different way.
I'd like to tell you a story, just a really brief story that I think might give you some inspiration. In the military, it was about 15 years ago when we recognized that suicide was such a problem in the military. The Air Force decided to identify people in the Air Force in a community setting that could rally around the needs of human beings. And I guess this was in a community after, I'm trying to think how this worked, but I guess my message that I want to get across is that working local matters. There was an effort, a community effort involved police, firemen, teachers, healthcare workers, citizens, in identification of people at risk for suicide. And I'm learning how to reach out to people who are depressed, to children, adolescents, adults, family members, that everyone was together. There was not a hierarchy. It was like joining together with people of different walks of life, but all taking seriously the need to identify people who were in trouble, who were depressed, and were really giving up on life. And there was a tremendous success of this effort. It was local and it was run by people themselves, you and me kind of people, not by, you don't need, you do need somebody to help organize it. But I'm getting, I'm responding to what I think Tali and others of you have talked about, just Hassan just now, and I think that what you're talking about is bringing people together. And I think there's a future for that. You don't need it to be at a state level. Right here at home, you can make things happen. How do you appeal to people? How do you organize people? I don't know, but any thoughts about that? Jamar, I think I'm piling up on what you just said. You inspired me to bring that forward. So.
I think it's important to leverage the universities. Like, so successful reentry for me, one of the major, outside of finding a purpose greater than myself, which was my son being born, but the major part of my successful reentry involved education, literally. Like, so the minute I was committed to successful reentry, I enrolled in CCAC. When that was done, I wasn't there for a degree. I was there for the process that allowed me to successfully reenter. Then I went to Point Park and got my degree there. So when anybody asks me, well, so what elements are part of successful reentry? Education is it. So I think right now in this space we in, the collaboration has to happen where you literally can go to one of these universities and earn a degree that would put you in a position to be an executive or an administrator of one of these reentry organizations or institutions. I think that like a reentry, executive office, something, I think so. Right now, I think we should leverage the universities and the energy that we have to where you can get some type of degree or certificate that says you can actually operate a reentry program at a high level.
Dee, is there something like that in the works right now at Duquesne? Certificates for
there is, I don't know a ton about it, but I do know that there is a certificate, and we have some members of the Elsinore-Bennu think tank who are pursuing that right now. And it includes some of the Inside Out curriculum, which is classes where cops, returned citizens and students take classes together. So there is some opportunities for those certifications at Duquesne. I don't know a lot about the requirements around it, but there's definitely movement through that. And I would say to definitely get involved with the think tank if you're interested in learning more about that. And I did just want to say, while I was talking about the think tank, that one of the reasons that I really like being a part of the think tank is because I feel like I've been oddly pessimistic, considering my typically optimistic personality on this panel, but that there is, on the individual level, there is change to be made and there is impact happening. I used to be really into like Earth Day and like environmental activism because my birthday is on Earth Day, but I didn't see those individual impacts. And so I started to feel very like existential in that. And then I started to focus a lot more on reentry. And the reason that it keeps me going is because I haven't changed the system yet, but I will one day. But in the meantime, I have seen people's lives, including my own, be measurably better and impacted by being a part of this. Even as somebody who's never been involved in the criminal justice system, I relate to the experiences that were talked about here and the experiences that come up in the think tank all the time, so much so that I felt a lot of acceptance and I felt understood again. And so like I really found my way, and I realized that, how we have said tonight, that social networks and social cohesion is so important to keep us together. And there is lights at the end of the tunnel, and the individual days do matter. And one person's life being impacted is a meaningful advancement towards success. And so I didn't want to downplay that, but there is systemic change that needs to happen.
I have a question. I wondered if Sydney was collecting any questions from the audience. We have about a little bit less than, well, about 10 minutes. And also, if there's anything, Dee, for you to say at the end of this about a future for people who are interested in working together. But I don't know if Sydney's been asking for any input. Do you know, Dee? There are questions from the audience.
I think that if there were some, she probably would have put them in the chat for us. So I'm going to go with no, but if anyone on Zoom has questions, please do ask.
Right. So I wonder if our panelists, what your reaction is to what Dee just said. Is there light at the end of the
Yes,
tunnel?
there's definitely light. There's definitely. I've seen just the movement and the impact that the collaboration that we've had with the universities, how it's impacted my life. So there's definitely light at the end of the tunnel, and I think we're building a momentum. So momentum is building, and what we got to realize is that this takes one life at a time. It's momentum. It's like the snowball at the top of the hill, and hopefully we'll get the ball rolling, and other people will see kind of what's happening and jump on board. Because just as I'm saying that we can leverage the partnerships of universities, we also need folks to be advocating with their politicians on, look, I need more for my state dollars. There's no reason for you to incarcerate an individual for 5 years and then come out and say, what job can he do? Like you had a captive audience for 5 years. You should be putting out someone that has the ability to go fill one of these jobs that they say that they need. There's no way. And we've done that before. It was convict leasing. It's just they wasn't paying anything for the salary. So we got to demand more from our taxpayers to say, listen, these institutions that you're building, we should be coming out to the position jobs for these guys, and that makes my community safer when you release them, and it gives them the ability to thrive. Hassan, Jamar, y'all got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I wanted to say that definitely we are going in a better direction, and things are moving towards a change. And when I say moving towards a change, it's because there's a lot of people that have had done time or been impacted from the carceral system that are stepping in roles to help move things forward, and the voices are starting to be heard. One of the things that Talib pointed out too is that educational systems or educational places play a pivotal role in that, to equip people to move forward into successful reentry, but then also into places of leadership to change the dynamics. But it's something that it's not just people coming out. That's not educational places. It's just not politicians, but it takes a group of all. So in order to steer this ship that's been going a certain way for so long, it's going to be I wish it would move faster, but it's going to take all of us, and it's going to take some time. And one of the things that sticks out that I want to throw out there is the documentary, The 13th Amendment. It captures some of what Talib was talking about, but then also the African American Museum down in DC, where it talks also about what Talib is talking about, how they used to lease people, and they used to make laws to keep people back enslaved so they could continue using that manpower. But we are definitely going in a better direction. We just need more of it and more people to be on the same page as well.
Thank you. Hassan, can I put you on the spot? You're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
As he said, if you can leverage the institutions as well as some of these businesses, the Amazons, the people that need these workforces, you know what I mean? If there was any way that they could coordinate with an organization or so to say, we need these many workers, and maybe have incentives for them to hire or train some of these guys coming home, that I think that would be helpful as well.
So I know we're getting close to the end, but I wanted to call attention. Sydney had put forward a question about international models, and maybe we could learn something from them. And Dee, you've got an idea about that.
Yeah, so I haven't really looked into that from the veteran perspective, but I had a chance to talk a lot with Dr. Sarah Kuhn, who's a professor at Slippery Rock University and another member of the think tank. And she does criminology and criminal justice. And she's also an immigrant from Germany. And she talked about how they have prisons set up there. And the main thing that stuck out to me when I go back to the identity and the autonomy is that their recidivism rates in Germany are much, much lower, and they're much more welcoming when people come back. But the way that they have it set up is that it's almost like little dorm rooms. Like the punishment is that your freedom is taken away from you. So you have to be here, but you have to cook your own food, wash your own laundry, have some kind of individuality within that space. And in America, sometimes I've heard people say like, well, that's too nice, or people don't deserve that. And I mean, well, what's our goal here? Are we punishing people, or are we trying to rehabilitate people? And are we trying to allow them to learn and to come back into our community and be, well-rounded members? So I think that, at least for the prison perspective, it's been proven to work over there. I'm sure that they have a lot of things they need to work on. I'm sure no system is perfect, but they are leaps and bounds ahead of us.
And the outcomes, is there data on how successful it is?
I don't have all the data in front of me. There definitely is data. I know the recidivism rates are much lower there. I'll try to Google that on the side while we're talking.
The other thing I wondered is that everybody, I think, has noted some resources that we'd like to share with people after this. And it's good to get them in the chat. And I'm wondering if there's another mechanism, Dee, for making them available after this online or something, a list of things. We can work together to gather the information that people have offered.
That's a great idea. I can put together a list and I can send it out to all of our Zoom attendees and stuff. Maybe if you're somebody who is listening in person, you can give it to Sydney or to whoever to email us, so I can make sure that you get the information. And we can also post it on all of our social media. So socialclubduke _DUQ on Instagram.
Great, thank you. Good idea. Any other thoughts from our panelists?
I did just find that it looks like the recidivism rate for Germany is around 40%. So still pretty high. Like I said, nothing is perfect, but compared to what Tylee said, our 83, that's half. So
yeah,
big difference.
Yeah, yes, it is.
Thank you. Yeah,
You're moving in the right direction.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know what? Pittsburgh has a companion community in Germany. Oh, no, it's not in Germany, it's in England. But it would be interesting if we had a companion partnership with the system in Germany that you're talking about, and establish something maybe a little formal for communication between picking one of these institutions in Germany and Pittsburgh. I don't know, that would take some work, but it would be pretty cool if we could learn from them. I'm glad Sydney pointed out the possibility of learning from outside of the US. I know we've only got about 2 more minutes, and it looks like Dee froze on us. So I'm going to say, yeah, go ahead. She is here. I know she's here. She doesn't seem to be moving. I think we're not going to lose. She's not.
I can see her.
No, there she is. She's back. I'll just say a few closing words, and then Dee will as well. I want to thank everybody who participated today. I, for one, learned a lot. And I hope that we have an opportunity in the not too distant future to work together to continue this dialogue, that it's not just limited to this hour and a half today, seriously. And there are people in the audience who haven't spoken, but are here for a reason, because they care and they're very interested in learning and contributing. Dee, I'm going to hand the mic over to you to close us up.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for coming. I do hope that you consider joining us tomorrow too on the last day of the Social Justice Research Symposium. Tomorrow is Action and Resistance Day. So that's the day that we're really trying to bring you guys some hope and inspiration if you're feeling some type of way after all of these events. They'll be at the same times. The morning session will be 11 o'clock to 12:30 and the afternoon will be 1:30 to 3. And I also just want to say thank you so much to Dr. Haas for moderating. I think you were absolutely fantastic and you asked great questions and we couldn't have done this without you. And for Sydney for setting up that in room 613 for us. And of course to our panelists, Hassan, Tylee, Jamar, you guys are amazing. And yeah, I do hope to stay in touch, do some research. Thank you.
Thank you all. It's a privilege to meet you all and talk.